enjoyed your week off. Welcome back to Newsroom. Chella Smith here, your Middle East U.S. entertainment news here on YouTube. I air on Fridays. I bring you the latest on reforms and economics based on reports put out by the Middle East news media outlets. I do this weekly review and it's based off my interest. Thank you everyone for joining me. If you're joining me for the first time and you're holding the IraqIDinar, maybe this channel will be of interest for you. Today, at the end of our broadcast, we'll be airing the briefing by the SRGS, Janine Plashart, to the UN Security Council from February 24th. Because we missed last week's show with the Viewers Appreciation Drawing, we're going to air it this week. I hope you guys have been enjoying your week, but first, let's get right into our news headlines. There's a lot going on around the world right now. Shafak News reports yesterday that the White House announced the allocations of $10 billion to fund humanitarian, economic, and security aid plans for Ukraine and its neighboring countries. According to American media, the amount will be allocated to cover the cost of spending additional military equipment and delivering urgent food supplies to Ukrainian people. The amount also includes funding for implementation of sanctions against Russia, including the establishment of task force under the supervision of the U.S. Department of Justice to pursue the assets of wealthy Russians who have been targeted by the sanctions. The White House has sent a request to the U.S. Congress to approve the release of those amounts and to start sending aid. Shafak News reported oil prices fell Thursday after recording their highest level in nearly a decade as sanctions disrupt Russian crude sales, but the rose lost some of its uncertainties due to the growing prospects of concluding a nuclear agreement with Iran. As an analyst at RBC Capital says that the Iran deal cannot replace the Russian turmoil and the descent will be limited. The benchmark Brent index rose to 119.84 a barrel, the highest since 2012, with additional support coming from data showing that the U.S. crude stocks before falling by 2021 GMT to 112.75 a barrel. The prices of the U.S. contracts fell to reach 109.66 after the prices reached 116 yesterday morning after the Iranian reporter tweeted about a breakthrough in the talks of a revive in the Iranian nuclear agreement and may witness the return of Iranian oil barrels to the markets. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which monitors Iran's nuclear activity, will visit Iran on Saturday in another move seen as the rising prospects of a deal. Baghdad Ops reports the financial advisor to Prime Minister Mauser Saleh expected the disappearance of the official deficit in the federal financial budget with the continued rise in global oil prices. Saleh said that the economic situation in Iraq, in light of the high rise in oil prices, will witness a remarkable improvement, as will the state of public finance, and at the very least the disappearance of the official deficit of the budget if oil prices continue in this way. He says, however, there are global negative effects on the rise because the rise in fuel is global and Iraq is an importing country, which will lead to bearing the inflation of imported materials. Food, because there are two countries produce 30% of the world's gains. Saleh adds, Iraq and the world will receive high inflationary waves. It is noteworthy that with the escalation of the fighting in Ukraine, it seems that Iraq will be affected like other countries, but the degree of its impact will be great, according to experts who pointed to three strategic sectors that will face major challenges due to the war: wheat, AIM steel, and oil. Baghdad Ops reported the Democratic Party Parliament bloc announced March 3rd that the voting mechanisms for reopening the nominations for presidency will be half plus one. The representative of the bloc, Sharif Salman, said that the Democratic Party is awaiting a decision by the House of Representatives to reopen the nomination doors for the presidency next Saturday, noting that the recent federal court decision came in accordance with Article 59, while reopening the doors for nomination would be by the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives announced Wednesday the agenda for next Saturday's session, including voting to open the doors for nominations for the post of president again. And the media department of the council stated that the House of Representatives will hold its third session of the first legislative year for the first legislative term of the fifth session. He adds that the agenda, including voting to open nominations for the post of president of the Republic and the formation of the permanent parliamentary committee. Shafak News then reports the Central Bank of Iraq proposed on Wednesday to the Iraqi government to wait in concluding any contracts with Russia as a result of the economic sanctions imposed by Washington on Moscow. This came in an official letter addressed by the bank to the Secretary General of the Iraqi Council of Ministry. The central bank governor, Mustafa Ghalib, says, "We would like to inform you that as a result of the current war between Russia and Ukraine, the U.S. Treasury has imposed sanctions on Russian financial and economic institutions for the purpose of limiting Russia's capabilities in the war. And for the purpose of protecting the Iraqi financial system, we suggest waiting for the time being." About concluding the government contracts with Russia side and the need to wait to transferring any financial payments that pass through the financial system in Russia. The governor of the central bank called on the Secretary General of the Council of Ministry to circulate this to various ministries and agencies with the need to provide us with the aspects that each ministry deals with the Russian side for the purpose of finding the appropriate mechanism in the areas and ways that ensure the integrity of the financial system in Iraq. Baghdad Magazine News reported Tuesday that the financial advisor to Prime Minister Mauser Mohammed Saleh identified two directions for resolving the exchange rate crisis, while explaining that the extent to which the currency markets were affected by conflicting statements. Saleh says that the currency market is inevitably affected by information, and the bond sales markets it is also affected, which is free markets with dualist and the information markets, pointing out that sometimes there is false information that disturbs the markets, or maybe truthfuls that lead to exchange of buying and selling very quickly. He adds that it is not possible to deviate from the context of the Ministry of Finance, but if the exchange rate is modified, it will have benefits and a loss, and that the state loss will be greater because it achieves revenues in the form of an inflation tax at the rate of 20%. And if the value of the dinar is raised, the value of the increase will be lost by public finance, especially, and that if it depends on 93% of the value of its revenues, that depends on oil, as it is a key player in managing the budget, stressing that. Shafak News reported the Iraqi parliament hosted Monday its second session of the fifth electoral cycle's Finance Minister Ali Alawi and discussed the dollar exchange rate and its repercussions on the local markets in the presence of 288 deputies. The council discussed with Alawi the repercussions of high dollar exchange rates on the markets, the damage to the poor segment, and discussions of public debt and the financial policy of the Ministry of Finance and the proposed treatments. Alawi reviewed in a detailed explanation the reasons for changing the exchange rate and its relationship to economic reforms, which was according to the extensive study in which concerns parties participated and was not an individual decision by the Ministry of Finance, noting that the exchange rate changed at the time was against the background of the deterioration in global oil prices due to the impact of the pandemic, the corona, and decline in the volume of Iraqi oil exports, according to the International Monetary Fund, amounted to 4.9%, as well as the failure to approve the 2020 budget due to the resignation of the government, which led to stifling financial crisis that prevented the payments of salaries of employees and retirees, which prompted the House of Representatives to pass the legal deficit financing amounting to 27 trillion dinars. Shafak News reported Monday Iraqi's President Barham Saleh came during his reception at the Peace Palace in Baghdad, the head of the European Union election observation mission. On the occasion of the end of the mission's work, According to a presidential report, Saleh stressed the necessity of meeting the national entitlements, joining hands, and adhering to the constitutional timing and forming a capable, effective government that protects the interests of the country and enhances sovereignty, protecting and serving the Iraqis, and achieving the necessary reforms for a stable and prosperous Iraq. For her part, Viola von Kramon presented to the Iraqi president the final reports prepared by the European Union mission on election monitoring, praising the efforts of the Iraqi authorities in making the elections a success and affirming the Union's commitment to continuing supporting Iraq. On Sunday, the head of the European Union mission to monitor the Iraqi elections, Viola von Kramon, confirmed that she is not close to the Iraqi political party itself, noting that she is looking forward to meeting Iraqi officials and the parliamentarians after submitting the final reports on the Iraqi elections that were held on the 10th of October, 2021. Kramon said that the mission presented its final reports on the elections, which includes a number of proposals, including a law to protect data and ensure the rights of citizens to exercise freedom and vote without friction on the internet. Baghdad today reports this past Sunday that the U.S. State Department commented on Iraq's payment of compensation to Kuwait. The ministry stated in a statement that the United States welcomes the recent resolution of the United Nations Security Council, which reaffirms that Iraq has fulfilled its international obligation to compensate all compensations awarded to claimants through the United Nations Compensation Commission, established in 1991 as a result of the invasion Saddam Hussein's illegal occupation of Kuwait. She adds, "We salute the people of Iraq and Kuwait for this important achievement. Iraq today is a country that enjoys close and friendly diplomatic relations with our Gulf neighbors. This is crucial to maintaining stability, the important region," she stressed. And I'd like to end this segment with Iraq's UNSRSG briefing with Jennings Plashart at the United Nations Security Council on February 24th to show the importance of moving forward in Iraq. Let's take a look.
Thank
you, Mr. President. Distinguished members of the Security Council, if you allow me, I will begin today's briefing with an overview of recent developments concerning political appointments and government formation. Now, following the ratification of electoral results, the parliamentary speaker and his 2 deputies were elected on January 9. While this was initially contested, the Federal Supreme Court ruled on January 25 that the inaugural parliamentary session during which the speaker and his 2 deputies were elected was held in accordance with the Constitution. The next step is the election of a President of the Republic, according to the Constitution, within 30 days of the election of the speaker. However, and following an initial nomination period, on February 7, the parliamentary quorum for a session to elect a president was not met. Parliament decided to reopen the nomination period for another 3 days. The Federal Supreme Court has not yet ruled on whether this reopening was constitutional, but did rule one candidate ineligible. Now, once the president is elected, he or she will, within 15 days, according to the Constitution, charge the nominee of the largest parliamentary bloc, that is the Prime Minister designate, with the formation of a Council of Ministers to be endorsed by Parliament. Well, clearly the current situation suggests that we are not there yet. And while political consultations continue, or perhaps more accurately, the political impasse continues, time just passes by, precious time. Mr. President, behind the headline debate of a majority versus consensus government, many Iraqis increasingly wonder whether the national interest is actually front and center in the ongoing negotiations, rather than access to resources and power, or how the pie of political appointments and ministries will be carved this time around. Needless to say, the priority should be to urgently agree on a program of action that immediately and meaningfully tackles Iraq's long list of outstanding domestic business. So what I'm saying is the elections are over 4 months behind us, and it is high time to return the spotlight where it deserves to be, on the people of Iraq. The people of Iraq who continue to wait for gainful, productive employment opportunities, for safety and security, for adequate public service delivery, for the full protection of their rights and freedoms, for justice and accountability, for meaningful participation of women and youth, to name but a few. Of course, one could be forgiven for being patient with a prolonged government formation phase if we were witnessing vibrant exchanges on policy orientations, on development pathways and economic reform plans. If that was animating the negotiations, then indeed patience would be a virtue. However, so far we are observing quite the opposite, hampering the change and reforms the country so desperately needs. Moreover, and as I've pointed out countless times, a weak home front creates vulnerabilities. To Daesh, for instance, ready to take advantage of any political and security vacuum, but also to continued external interference. In the case of Iraq, not a hypothetical point. Now, in the meantime, the patience of the Iraqi people is being tested. In October 2019, this patience found its limits, and many Iraqis took to the streets, protesting a lack of socio-economic and political prospects. We know how that ended. Hundreds killed, thousands injured. The very least Iraqis may expect now is a sense of urgency from their elected representatives. A sense of urgency to overcome internal divisions, to agree on a program informing Iraqis on what they can expect in the next 4 years, to manage public expectations and to rise to the challenge of meeting the aspirations of the 40 million people who call Iraq home. Mr. President, a few words on the Baghdad-Erbil relationship. As you know, I have consistently emphasized the importance of a regular, structured and institutionalized Baghdad-Erbil dialogue with specific timelines to address the long outstanding issues. And as I've said before, this is a mutual responsibility. Fact is that the inability to overcome differences or even the unwillingness to find agreements, it comes sooner or later at a cost. Also true, if a political vacuum exists for too long, the judicialization of what are otherwise legislative or executive domains can suddenly be a fact of life. Now, with a caretaker government in office and political parties engaged in negotiations on the formation of a new government, a federal Supreme Court case pending for 10 years was very recently adjudicated. Hence, this recent court ruling on the unconstitutionality of the KRG oil and gas law prompted questions by many, such as, why now? Fact is, it happened. Consequently, the importance of this institutionalized dialogue has only increased. And not only that, the country needs its parliament to act. More broadly, what I'm saying is, letting things slide is risky business, with potentially far-reaching consequences undermining Iraq's stability in the short and long run. So once again, I call on all stakeholders to focus on what really matters, to unite instead of competing. Like it or not, but parties need each other to be their best. Hence, all efforts should center on resolving outstanding issues not by way of a power grab, but in a spirit of partnership and cooperation. Turning briefly to the economy, between a sharp rise in oil prices and a currency devaluation, the deficit has been reduced and foreign currency reserves have grown. The safety net has been expanded, notably due to increased spending on social services in response to the pandemic. Now, at first glance, this can sound encouraging, but there is no denying it, with important government proposals and efforts actively being undermined, delayed or halted, these results cannot be considered a direct consequence of sustainable strategies. Fundamentally, Iraq today is no less vulnerable to commodity price fluctuations. Iraq suffers no less from poverty or underemployment, and Iraq witnesses no less corruption than it did last year or the year before. I again repeat myself, but durable structural solutions can only come through meaningful reform. And yes, this is easier said than done. I realize that. However, Iraq is running out of time. As an Iraqi official put it to me some time ago, even if we had started implementing the most urgent reforms the day before yesterday, it will take suprahuman efforts to sufficiently address today's financial, economic, and environmental challenges. And while I'd like to think in the terms of the glass half full, his remarks are not to be taken lightly. Also with regards to environmental challenges, they present a looming threat that is far too often considered less urgent, but it's ultimately one of the greatest global challenges we collectively face. A few weeks ago, I visited Iraq's marshlands in southern Iraq, a dramatic, beautiful landscape whose biodiversity is equaled only by its cultural significance. However, water scarcity in this region is not just a threat on the horizon. It is a present danger. As is the case for other parts of the country, desalinization of water and soils, desertification and the disappearance of arable land are nothing less than existential environmental concerns. Moreover, water scarcity, as we all know, is a threat multiplier. With it come heightened risks of poverty, displacement, instability, and conflict. Now, much, but not all of this scarcity can be explained by climate change. Water flows are also actively being reduced by neighboring countries. Further, potable water and irrigation infrastructure and maintenance are significantly lagging behind. Iraq's water resources have been ineffectively managed for too long. In other words, Iraq is acutely vulnerable to the effects of water scarcity due to climate change and reduced inflows from its rivers. While I know that this is a priority for the current caretaker government, I would like to emphasize that shared ownership of this crucial file across the political spectrum will prove essential. Mr. President, something else. Camps and prisons across the border hosting many Iraqis in northeastern Syria, to be precise. All of us will have closely followed recent events that have made the risks associated with this slow-moving catastrophe yet again clear. The situation in these camps and prisons presents unprecedented challenges, with implications for the region and far beyond, ticking time bombs. Over the past 3 years, you've heard me repeat that the legacy of yesterday's fight against Daesh could very easily turn into tomorrow's war, that we should not wait for young children to come of age in a camp like Al-Hol. These children, living in dire circumstances, never asked to be part of this mess. However, they find themselves deprived of their rights. These children find themselves at risk of forced recruitment and exposure to violent extremism. Now, of course, I recognize that a number of states have upheld their responsibilities by taking back children, and in some cases also limited numbers of women. And I can only hope that other states will soon follow suit. As a growing number of countries have shown, this can be done successfully. Fact is, the current situation is not sustainable, and keeping people indefinitely in the restricted and poor conditions of these camps ultimately creates greater protection and security risks than taking them back in a controlled manner. Meanwhile, Iraq has demonstrated courage. So far, around 450 families, or some 1,800 persons, have been repatriated to Iraq. And as thousands of Iraqis are still out there, the Iraqi authorities do realize that they cannot stop there. Now, Mr. President, turning from a whole camp to the suspected ISIL combatants currently in custody in northeastern Syria, again, an unsustainable situation. Moreover, and as is the case for a camp like Al-Hol, these facilities fuel resentment and also inspire terrorists. from breakout operations to large-scale attacks, as we have seen. Also, the fact that some fighters and associated family members have been able to make their way out suggests it would be better to control the situation and manage returns, rather than take the chance of missing them as they slip back undetected into any country. Also here, Iraq deserves to be commended. The Iraqi government did not only make a start with the repatriation of Iraqi families in Al-Hol, it has also begun repatriating Iraqi ISIL combatants. Essentially what I'm saying is, in the interest of everyone, the ultimate security argument, as opposed to the short-term political one, is to recognize that a continued status quo is the riskiest option. Now, to appease festering grievances, to prevent the emergence of new conflicts, and to defuse ticking time bombs, it is important to anticipate and mitigate. It is important to step up and get things done. Mr. President, turning now to the issue of missing Kuwaiti third country nationals and missing Kuwaiti property, including the National Archives. On February 16, UNAMI facilitated the return from Kuwait back to Iraq. We facilitated the return of the last 6 human remains that were determined not to be part of the Kuwait or Saudi Arabia lists of missing persons. With this transfer, the identification process of all human remains discovered in Samoa Muthana Governorate in 2019 and 2020 has been concluded. As I've stressed before, it is imperative for the government of Iraq not to lose this momentum, but instead to take advantage of the experience gained so far, and thus to move towards the overall conclusion of this important humanitarian file. Mr. President, in closing, let me reiterate the importance of a sense of urgency. It is urgent for Iraq's political leaders to overcome divisions, to put aside partisanship, and to bury personal vendettas. You know, Iraq truly has immense potential, if only this potential were fulfilled. How bright Iraq's future could be. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Я благодарю госпожу Хеннис Плассард за ее брифинг и сейчас предоставляю.
I hope you like that coverage. And lastly, before we go, last week we had a comment by T. Roy. It stated, "Please stay with us until the end of this thing. You are appreciated beyond words." Thank you so much. I appreciate you and I appreciate all the following, and I most certainly will do my best. Well, that's it for this week's Newsroom Weekly Review, your Middle East U.S. entertainment news on reforms and economics. I try to bring you all the latest Dinar news without having to keep up with all the different outlets. I'm Chella Smith, Newsroom here on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like my content, give me a thumbs up. I will see you guys next Friday for your next Newsroom updates. Shout out to Currency 365. He got us that footage. And for his continued support. If you want to learn about stocks and cryptos, you can join him and his crew for the most recent updates. You can find him on YouTube or Patreon. Well, I have children coming in from the Marines this weekend, and they're going to be stationed in Japan in less than a month. So I'll be spending great family time with them for the next few weeks. So have a beautiful weekend, everyone, and take care. Make sure you join us Fridays, 4 p.m. with Newsroom Updates with Chella Smith Entertainment News.